ضبطوا.
Well, let's make it clear from the offset that this is a significant escalation, and I believe a significant miscalculation by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Iranian regime, and his all-powerful ideological army, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. Look, all the options on the table for Khamenei's regime were bad for the regime. It was a lose situation no matter which option he chose. But of all the options, he opted for the worst for the regime. The strikes yesterday, unprecedented in nature, again, similar to the April attacks, but almost certainly as a result of these strikes, which appear to be more symbolic than practically meaningful for the regime, and maybe that was the intent for Khamenei. But this attack now has made an Israeli response, an Israeli retaliation in Iran against the IRGC almost certain, inevitable, and the regime is about to incur significant losses. So of all the options on the table for the Islamic Republic, it picked the worst one for itself, and it's going to face the consequences for its actions. There are many options on the table for Israel, and if we just compare it to the April retaliation, there were many factors in April that have changed today. Hamas's entire infrastructure has been effectively dismantled, at least its military components. Hezbollah, which is the Iranian regime's creation, the Iranian regime's most valuable proxy asset on the northern border of Israel, the senior leadership of Hezbollah has been completely dismantled. Hassan Nasrallah, who was akin to a son to Ayatollah Khamenei, has been killed. Hezbollah is no longer the force that it was in April. So the Israelis have more options on the table this time round. They have demonstrated in their retaliation in April that they can penetrate the Iranian air defense system. At the moment, several targets seem like they are most likely to take place. The first is targeting the Iranian regime IRGC military intelligence assets in Iran, those assets that played a key role in orchestrating this attack, those assets that have played a key role in orchestrating terrorist attacks more broadly across the region, across the world. By the way, the IRGC, it should be noted here, the same force that fired and attacked Israel last night is the same force that kills Iranians on the streets of Iran. So the Iranian domestic response has largely been positive to the killing of Nasrallah, for example. And yesterday, when the regime was firing against Israel, people were on the rooftops chanting death to Khamenei. So that gives you the sentiment. If Israel were to strike the IRGC, that would largely be welcomed by the overwhelming majority of the Iranian people. So IRGC assets are one target. The regime's oil infrastructure is another prime target. The oil infrastructure, by the way, is controlled by the IRGC. These aren't civilian-controlled oil refineries. So the oil refineries, the gas outposts for the Islamic Republic are all in the hands of the IRGC's economic arm, the Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters. Now, these oil refineries are one of the main arteries of the Islamic Republic. They are one of the main means through which the Islamic Republic exists financially, economically. It is one of the main support lines for the broader infrastructure of the regime, not least the financing of terrorist proxies like Hezbollah, like the militias in Iraq and Syria, and groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Targeting the oil refineries would have a significant hit for the regime. It would be a significant setback in the regime's access to cash. So that is an option on the table, I think, that's being taken very seriously. And the final option at the moment that I believe is on the table is targeted high-value assassinations against the IRGC senior leadership command. Assassinations that are very surgical, that are very precise, that take out the particular terrorist individual. We've seen Israel do this in relation to Ismail Haniyeh, for example. The Hamas leader was visiting Tehran and was under IRGC protection, yet Israel managed to kill Ismail Haniyeh in the heart of Tehran. So that is another option that is on the table. And I think those three targets, A, IRGC intelligence military assets, B, targeting the IRGC's oil infrastructure, and C, targeting senior IRGC commanders that will have played a hand in orchestrating the attacks last night. Well, the nuclear facilities are a legitimate target for Israel to strike. Why? Well, I think yesterday's attack clearly demonstrated why. This is a regime that is violent, Islamist extremist. It is a deeply ideological regime. Its ideology is centered on the eradication of the state of Israel. Previously, the thought was that the Islamic Republic, Khamenei's regime, would never directly strike Israel. It would do so via its proxies because US officials, including US officials now in the administration, said the regime in Iran is not suicidal. They would know that if they did this, they would receive a retaliation. Well, the regime in Iran has now done the impossible twice, first in April, then last night. That demonstrates why the regime in Iran should not be allowed to have nuclear weapons. This would be an existential threat to Israel, but it would also be an existential threat to the people of Iran, who have taken to the streets en masse and have sought to overthrow the Islamic Republic. Now, we're in a situation where the nuclear sites are perfectly legitimate targets for Israel. In terms of the nuclear escalation, let's be clear. The Islamic Republic's nuclear program is a weaponization program in all but name. It always has been. And the intent has always been to obtain nuclear weapons. The IRGC's security doctrine, the IRGC controls the nuclear weapons program. It controls the regime's nuclear program. The IRGC's security doctrine is centered around three aspects. The first is its proxy networks. The second is its ballistic missile program, and the third is its nuclear weapons program. It has sought to pursue the nuclear weapons program from day one. It is escalating significantly, expanding that nuclear program en masse, particularly since the Biden administration has taken office. Now, the intent is there. If they haven't already achieved it, it's not for not trying and not wanting it. I believe it's because they don't have the final capability to obtain that nuclear weapon. Now, if they were to progress and somehow move beyond that, if they were to suddenly get the capability to get that final element to achieve a nuclear weapon, they know as soon as they push the threshold, Israel will target the nuclear sites. So it's a situation for Khamenei where he's effectively been checkmate. It's a lose situation for Khamenei. He has no good options on the table. And as I said, yesterday's attack demonstrated that he picked the worst option. Those nuclear sites are now legitimate targets for Israel to strike. Israel cannot and should not tolerate a nuclear-armed Islamic Republic. That would be an existential threat for Israel. It would be an existential threat for the people of Iran who are seeking to topple this regime. And it would be a significant threat to global peace and security. In many ways, what we can tell from last night's attack is that the Iranian ballistic missile program is not as capable as was previously assumed. It's exposed great weaknesses in this program. It has also demonstrated that Khamenei has a fear of what the Israelis might do. As I said, the symbolic nature of this attack, again, like April, served more symbolic purposes than being practically meaningful. That's a huge gamble for Khamenei's regime because A, not only have they miscalculated, this an inevitable Israeli retaliation is going to take place, but they've also exposed that their missile capability isn't as strong as previously thought. Israel has exposed the fact that its militia proxy network isn't as strong as previously assumed. These assumptions, by the way, had always held back Western forces, had always held back the US, had always held back other Western allies, including Britain. there was this caution towards the proxy network, particularly Hezbollah, the gold standard militia. So the regime's ideology, the regime's capability rather, has been exposed. The vulnerabilities of that capability has been exposed. And a secondary aspect is that the regime's ideology is also failing to mobilize as many people as previously thought. The West, again, had bought the propaganda that the regime's ideology was able to significantly mobilize Shia Islamists across the region. Again, that was a cause of hesitation, that was a cause of preventing further action against the Islamic Republic, but that has also been exposed. So not only has Khamenei miscalculated in the sense that he has now invited a inevitable Israeli retaliation on Iranian soil against the key regime military security sites, but also he's revealed his hand that actually the three elements of the IRGC security doctrine, the militia network, the ballistic missile program, and the nuclear weapons program, aren't as strong as previously thought. And that really puts the Ayatollah in the corner. You know, to put it in boxing terms, we're effectively waiting for the final right hook. Khamenei is on the ropes, and they are at the moment trying to calculate what to do next. I think the US messaging is actually this time around been pretty good, making it clear that they stand alongside Israel and that they have played a role in intercepting missiles, etc. Keir Starmer gave a very powerful message yesterday, but the message seemed detached from reality. Starmer kept placing emphasis on a diplomatic solution, and that's just completely detached from the reality on the ground. Starmer has also pledged support for Israel, but, and this is the big but, we have yet to see Keir Starmer prescribe the IRGC as a terrorist organization. And this takes place against the backdrop of rising IRGC terrorism on British soil, taking place targeting British Iranians and the British Jewish community. Let's not forget that the IRGC is the most anti-Semitic organization in the world. Starmer now, prior to the election, prior to being elected, he vowed to prescribe the IRGC as a terrorist organization. He's taken office, he's yet to implement this into policy. And this is of utmost importance because, to go back to what we were previously discussing, one of the options the regime in Iran has, one of the options the IRGC has, is asymmetric warfare tactics, terrorism, militancy, hostage takings, hijackings. That is the IRGC's strength. Its entire doctrine is built around asymmetric warfare, terrorism, and militancy. For decades, these asymmetric tactics had been able to keep conventional forces that are conventionally superior to the IRGC, at bay. It had led to caution, it had caused trouble for these conventionally superior armed forces. Recently, the IRGC's changed track. It's now trying to compete in conventional terms, through conventional means, and that's an inevitable battle that it's going to lose. But the IRGC may, and it already is, double down on its asymmetric warfare tactics. And that means, by the way, increasing terrorist attacks targeting not just Israelis, but the Jewish community across the world, civilians. Why? Because the IRGC may calculate that, look, we don't have the capabilities to penetrate the Israeli air defense system. We don't have the capabilities to target Israeli military postings. But one way we may be able to change the calculus of the Israeli Prime Minister is through a new campaign of terror targeting Jews across the world. This is, by the way, something they've done in the past, in the 2000s. They've done it prior to that in 1994, bombing Jewish community centers, assassinating Jewish civilians across the world. We know that they have put together a list of British Jewish targets in this country. We know that they are doubling down on nurturing homegrown Islamist terrorism using tactics like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It is of utmost importance that Starmer, given that this is taking place against the backdrop of this attack and the escalation that's going to be increasing, Starmer prescribes the IRGC immediately. And Biden, the US, should be pressuring. The US has already prescribed the IRGC as a terrorist organization. The US should now be pressuring all of its allies, not least Britain, France, and Germany, to take this move to protect their communities. This is about national security. And until the IRGC is not prescribed, British national security is at threat, not least British citizens coming from the Jewish community and the Iranian community. They're the two prime targets of IRGC terrorism.